I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Plan and Design Commission of the City of Highland Park for December 6th, 2022. Mr. Fontaine, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Quinlan.
Here.
Commissioner Brockman.
Here.
Commissioner Kirsch.
Present.
Commissioner,
Choked you up.
sorry, Vice Chair Moore.
Here.
I swallowed wrong. And Chairman Hainsworth.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Oh.
Oh, yes, you forgot. You know, he's,
Commissioner Hecht, my apologies.
Commissioner Hecht is here and always my right-hand person. We have a fairly brief, hopefully, meeting tonight. There will be no minutes to be approved this evening. That'll happen at the next meeting. We have two items of scheduled business. One is consideration of a plat of re-subdivision, a consolidation with variances for 1666 Cedar and 980 Dean, and then continuation, I believe, of a public hearing for a special use permit to allow an animal clinic or hospital land use, not including design review, and a special exception request for off-street parking relief, and waiver of payment in lieu at 661 Central. So with that, we will call the first item of business, which is consideration of a plat. This is not a public hearing, right?
That is correct. This is a public meeting. A plat is a public
Thank
meeting.
you. Consideration of a plat of re-subdivision consolidation with variations at 166 Cedar Avenue and 980 Dean Avenue. Carl, do you have a presentation for us?
Yes, very brief, Chair. Thank you.
That's the kind we like, but thorough, I know.
Yes, no doubt. Okay, so this is just a presentation for the plat of consolidation, and there were findings of fact included in the packet for 980 Dean Avenue and 166 Cedar Avenue. This is the subject property, approximately in the south part of the city. One of them's a corner lot, one of them is not. The property to the south, the one on Dean, has steep slope zones on it. So the request is for these two properties to be consolidated into one property. Currently they are two separate buildable lots with two homes. The proposal is to tear down the home on 980 Dean Avenue. I believe that is tracking to the Historic Preservation Commission for demo review for Thursday. And those are just the square footages. Those were in the report. This was in the report as well. You see only two red marks. Obviously, green means good, red means issue. So the lot shape, the requirement is 4 sides. Technically, both lots separately right now do meet that. The proposed lot, because of the shape, they're not the same size. It's going to be 6 sides, and so that does need variation, and that is a new condition, not a pre-existing condition. If it was a pre-existing condition and there was no other variation, this would just be something that got signed off by the chair, but would still go to the city council. But since this is a new variation that doesn't exist, this is before the Plan and Design Commission for recommendation. It will still go to the city council for final consideration. And then creation of nonconformities, there's a red one there. You can't create any nonconformities. Well, there are 2 homes on it. You can consolidate this and have 2 homes, so one of the homes will have to be demolished, and the applicant knows that. And the applicant states that 980 Dean will be removed, and I communicated with the applicant today, and that seems to be fine within the timeline to record the plat if approved within the 9-month period. Otherwise, it's a bunch of green. Complies with all the other requirements. It actually makes the properties more compliant. This is in the lakefront character and density overlay zone, and the parcel 1 actually does not meet that requirement. It also doesn't meet the R4 requirement, so it actually makes the property more compliant with zoning.
Parcel 1 being the property with that the house is going to be removed from, right?
Would it be parcel 1? Well,
Parcel 1 is the one that's to the top of the.
that's right. That home they're going to
It's
keep.
part of lot 1 that is being consolidated.
Right.
Is what you're talking about.
Right, so that's staying and the other one is going, the bigger one is going, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, just so I'm clear.
And then, as I already stated, the new property will be 6-sided, and that requires a variation. There's also steep slope zone on the property. That's just an FYI. Any development has to comply. And this is just the variation standard in the subdivision code. The standard is it does not affect the general plan or the spirit of the subdivision code. The variation, rather, the commission has defined, does not affect the general plan or the spirit of the subdivision code. Findings of fact, so the PDC makes a recommendation to city council regarding the proposed subdivision. Findings of fact recommending approval are in the PDC packet. Standard conditions were included, plus 2 additional conditions. Prior to recordation, applicant must retire the 980 Dean Avenue address. Typo in Dean should be capitalized, my apologies. Prior to recordation, the applicant must demolish the home on 980 Dean Avenue. And these have been discussed with the applicant in advance. Forestry. Forestry did have a memo. There's not a, well, I wouldn't put words into the forester's mouth. The packet was their memo was included in the packet. I don't think the foresters is concerned about the consolidation, as they just want it pointed out in writing in the public record that there is a heritage, that the way the buildable area will now change, there is a heritage tree that will now become in the buildable area. And this is, the forester just wanted that documented so that in case at any time in the future, if the applicant does proceed with construction that would necessitate a heritage tree removal request, I think the forester is just trying to set up that in writing now, because one of the standards is you can't have the hardship can't be self-imposed. But that's just something the forester has now. They're not opposed to the subdivision itself. They just want to protect the heritage tree long-term.
Yep. Okay.
And that's it. That's it.
Okay, questions for staff? Side, no. Side, no. One, yes, sir.
Sure.
Commissioner Quinlan.
Thank you. Staff recommends demolition of the principal structure. In addition, there's also I'm trying to understand, there's also like the linear square footage of the paved area, and there's the carriage garage. Is that to remain?
If it's,
I think they did say the garage, in the petition, that the garage was going to remain, didn't
Okay.
they?
if it's an accessory structure, it can remain. That would not create a nonconformity.
Okay, so I mean, with my lack of experience, I'm just envisioning, are we just gonna have like a crater where the house used to be, and then the driveway and carriage house and garage will remain as is?
I mean,
With access from
The-
Dean as well?
the applicant can certainly respond to that, but they, just from a zoning code and subdivision code standpoint, all those structures can remain and not create a nonconformity. The only structure that has to be removed is the principal structure, which is the home. The driveway could remain, so could any other accessory structure.
So the fencing around, it's not Dean, the fencing around, Cedar can remain, like the parcels don't need to be contiguous with accessibility?
No, they do not. They can keep the fencing as well.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it may not make practical sense for them to keep it that way, but there's nothing in the code that would prevent them from keeping it that way.
Okay. And, page 12 from the strategic plan, the graphic map of the subdivisional lots on the lakefront district, is that something that we can see?
You want me to pull that up? I can, absolutely.
While you're doing that, are you done with your questions? So let me,
Sure.
while he's working, he can multitask.
Sure.
Commissioner Heck, did you have a question?
I think it's actually along the same lines. So the 980 Dean principal residence, it's a 2-story stucco residence with basement, that's coming down.
That is my understanding, is the 980 D will be removed.
Look at
So the
shoulder.
stucco coach house with garage, that's remaining and is permitted. What I'm wondering about is, it says coach house, that to me says it's capable of being lived in as a residence, maybe it's an apartment, I don't know what it looks like. And why is that not considered a principal structure if it can be a separate residence? So it might have been legal non-conforming prior to this re-subdivision.
That's a great question.
Well, we should, may I respond?
Yeah,
So we definitely should have
He's
the
asking you the
applicant respond to that. If it isn't being used as a home, then it's an accessory structure, and that's a simple answer. But it is being used as, if it is being used as a home, then I would have to think about that.
Aren't they in violate, they
If
can't,
it can be used as a home, then I would think it would be.
well, there are coach houses all over town, right?
Right,
But
they
they
predate
can't,
the code.
they predate the code, but on the other hand, they're not allowed to, let's say, rent it out, right?
That's,
I mean, that's a violation of the ordinance, because then it becomes a it becomes multifamily, and they can't have more than one family on the lot. That's my understanding, at least. But I think that's a good question.
Right, unless there's non-conforming, well, there's a couple things here we're looking at for this property. If it has existing non-conforming rights, which I'm not saying it does or doesn't, I don't know at this exact moment in time. But if it has certain non-conforming rights, then, those non-conforming rights can be allowed to continue to be used that way. But if this property is being consolidated, no, there can only be one principal structure on the property. And anything else that's a principal structure would have to be removed, or that creates a non-conformity.
right, that's why I'm wondering how this is not considered a principal.
Yeah, I think
Coach
that's a
house
good.
is not a principal structure if it's capable of, now, it may not have a bathroom and kitchen, what have you, but if it does, perhaps that's.
Maybe
better
that's
for
the way
applicant.
I think that's an excellent question.
Yeah,
We'll ask them.
So there'll be two principal structures? on the-
Yeah, you can't have two principal structures on the same lot. Okay. So now you can answer Commissioner
On the
Quinlan's
property
question.
After the demolition?
Pardon me?
There'll be two principal structures on the property after the demolition?
If you consider if the coach house has, let's say, a kitchen and a bathroom, right? Yeah, then you've got,
A dwelling unit.
you have a dwelling unit, right?
I think it's a good
That's,
question. I think
that's
it's a good
the
guess.
question, right? We'll,
it's a good-
we'll,
I think it's a good
we'll
question.
allow the applicant to address that quickly when we're done asking staff
And
questions.
then Commissioner Quinlan, was it page 12 of the
Yep.
lakefront?
Yeah, that's it.
I
It's
believe,
blank.
if I remember correctly, you already asked me once where this graphic was, and I did actually look. And I cannot find anything that I feel comfortable as representing the correct graphic to put into this blank page. And I do actually remember looking this up. I found in a PowerPoint presentation from 20 years ago, I found a graphic that I think probably belongs in here, but I get very uncomfortable in going back 20-some years ago and trying to guess what belongs into something when it's not there. But I could not find any graphic in here that I felt comfortable putting in here. So it's blank.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, thank you, and thank you for the presentation regarding the R4 and lakefront zoning overlay. That helped answer some things that, or confirm some things that I was gonna ask, so.
But yes, I did, and I did want to point that out, because that makes, one of the parcels is only 17,000 square feet, and that doesn't meet the R4, it also doesn't meet the LFOZ. And this makes it more compliant with the LFOZ.
Yep. Thank you very much.
So you had no questions over on my left?
No, I knew Commissioner Quinlan would ask about the lakefront
Good.
overlay.
Good. Yes, Chair, you have a question? My only question is this: what happens if the Historic Preservation Committee, commission decides they're either going to put a hold on the demolition, or a delay on the demolition of the building that they want to tear down? What does that do to this
Well,
approval?
my understanding.
That'll happen before it goes to city council, I know.
Yeah, because that's scheduled for this Thursday, unless, of course, it gets
Right.
continued or something. I never presume a commission or council decision.
And they've heard it once before already.
That I
It was
did not.
continued, it was continued from a previous meeting.
My understanding is that the Historic Preservation Commission cannot deny a request, but they can either impose no delay, a 6-month delay, or a 12-month delay. And if they would impose the 12-month delay, and let's say the applicant would get a council approval, well, there's a 9-month expiration date on a plat approval. So the applicant would have to make a decision, and I'm not gonna make a decision for them. But they can either continue it at the council level, or they can resubmit it. They would have to weigh their options, and those are some of their options.
if
I don't-
resubmitted, they would have to get another 12-month delay where the plan would keep expiring and would have.
I would hope that the Historic Preservation Commission wouldn't do that. But like
No,
you
the
said,
commission, if it delays the demolition, that means that you can demolish the home after the delay
Right.
expires. So that wouldn't just keep going in a loop.
no, but
So it wouldn't affect the
no.
approval itself.
No, well, they might have to come back in.
They might have to come back
Might be
in,
able to
but-
demolish it, let's say, in a year at the worst case. But then that would mean they'd have to come back, or they'd either ask, you know, there'd
Well,
be some
yeah.
kind of delay in the consolidation
Yeah.
until they knew within
Yeah,
the window that they were gonna get.
the
Approval.
demolition would not be conditioned on the plat approval. A demolition can occur.
Right,
The reverse, however.
is true.
Yeah, however, the consolidation needs a demolition.
And I think it's just important for the petitioner to understand that situation. I don't anticipate, you know, I shouldn't say that. I've given up trying to figure out how certain commissions work, and that's one of them, so. Just, they've made some decisions that I go, what? Anyway, all right, thank you, Carl, that's all I needed. Petitioner want to address us or answer the question that was just posed of them, and please identify yourself. Spell your last name, or both names in your case, for the record, so the note taker can get that down.
Mark Lichtman, Lichtman,
And it's a M-A-R-C.
MARC. I'm with the law firm of Lichtman Eisen Partners. Cal Bernstein asked me to step in today and help him out. He has another matter pending in another municipality. I'm here to answer any questions to the extent that I know the answers to them.
So Commissioner Heck, do you want to restate your
Well, I
question?
guess is the coach house capable of dwelling?
I don't know that answer, but from my time on the zoning board, which was 15 years, I always understood that if the main house on the south property, or what I call the ravine property, that if the main house is destroyed, that it would not be a principal accessory if this consolidation is granted, but it would be an accessory structure. And I think that in either event, it's still considered an accessory structure for either of the two houses once it's consolidated. Now, in terms of living there, are you talking about like them renting it out?
No, not use. I just am wondering if that, under the code, would be considered a second principal structure, and whether, if it is, I don't know what it is or not.
Yeah.
If it is that something that
I don't think it is. I don't think.
variance can be granted to allow?
Well, I don't think that it's a
I don't know.
principal structure. I think it's in either event, it's an accessory structure to the existing house. And I think if they tore down the existing house and the lot is consolidated, then I think it would still be an accessory structure. So your question is whether or not anybody could live in there. You could always impose a condition that nobody could live in that house that is
Or that
an
coach house.
accessory structure into the coach house.
I think that's already in the code if it's an
I
accessory
think
structure.
it is
anyway.
too.
Yeah, I don't think that you can.
Let's see.
But my understanding, that's what an accessory structure would be.
Chair, if I may make a comment?
Yes, sure.
I was also going to recommend, if, you know, again, if the commission has concerns about that, again, I think Mr. Mark Lichtman may have stated the same thing, that could certainly amend the findings of fact with a specific condition that the not be used as a dwelling.
Well, yeah, we can condition on that coach house not being considered a principal structure under the zoning code. I'm looking for the definition now.
For which definition are you looking, sir?
Yeah, but that's,
Carl's got it memorized.
that's a variance, though. I wouldn't say that. I would say, I wouldn't, you can't give
Yeah.
a zoning variance as part
I
of it.
think what you want
That
to
would-
say is that it will not
That it
be
will not be
used.
used as a principal.
I think you want to
dwelling
make an
or a principal
affirmative
structure,
statement,
yeah.
probably.
Then that could be enforced.
I'm gonna
but-
look this up.
Okay.
I can-
Does-
We're going, Commissioner Kirsch?
Sorry, does anyone actually know what their plans are for the property? I'm kind
I
of
do.
surprised.
I do from this standpoint. I went back and looked at the Historic Preservation Commission minutes from the last meeting when they first looked at this. And the applicant said that they were going to build some accessory uses and were specific about a pool.
A pool.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they were gonna use it as a pool. So.
So they could-
But I'm not exactly
They're gonna
certain.
I mean,
tear house and build a pool.
Yeah, the coach house is in no better shape than than the other home, right? I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I was out, I'm sorry, I was out there Saturday on one of my walks, and it doesn't, I mean, to preserve, it would take a lot to preserve both of those, but I was just curious as to
Okay.
why someone would do this in the first place, and if they want room for a pool, that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't think the pool's gonna be taking up that much room, but, you know,
I,
some people, they want more space, so.
have you found it?
I did, and what I was afraid of is a principal structure is something that's not a secondary or accessory structure. And an accessory building is a subordinate detached building located in the same lot as a principal. So it's a big circle, and I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, we were on the zoning board together, and I always thought that an accessory structure was, you know, a pool house or a, detached garage.
Yeah, right.
In fact, I don't know if you remember, but we had the treehouse once,
Yes,
so
that was, yeah.
but that's really what it
Oh, the
comes down to.
cases we remember from zoning.
Yeah.
So,
They live here.
okay, any other questions to the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Quinlan?
Sure, yeah, the only thing that's kind of in the back of my mind is I'm just thinking of the FAR. So by demoing this building, does it increase the amount of, you know, it's gonna increase the amount of square footage available for,
Well, sure, because the FAR is based on square footage of the property.
so then.
They're right.
They could build a bigger house if they wanted
Or
to,
add on to the back.
or add on to their house.
These often get.
So that would make the pool pretty easy. if
But
the-
I would also say
Yeah.
that, you know, based on the average lot size, there are a lot bigger houses than what currently exists out there too, so.
I had actually represented the original seller house, the person who sold it to the people when they
Perlmutters?
bought it, and, to the Perlmutters. So when they bought it, probably 15, 20 years ago, probably that's when they bought it. I represented them, and that house had every amenity in the world, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It will be an accessory structure to the principal building, which is the home that's going to remain. Now,
Correct.
if this is also a dwelling unit, it's a very good point that the commission's making. Unfortunately, we don't have the answer to that, but you, like Carl suggested, just put in a condition, and then that takes care of that.
I think that's probably a
So I
smart
think that's the
idea.
only way to do
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
if council is okay with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you should.
yeah, Corporation Counsel.
So the coach house has existed as accessory to the principal house by demolishing the 980 Dean residence. From my reading of the definitions of accessory use, there's nothing to prohibit that coach house from continuing to be an accessory use. I didn't see really anything that would prevent two garages, two accessory uses. There's some municipalities that have, you know, a limit saying you can only have one garage on a lot of record. There's nothing like that in the Highland Park
I
code.
think in this case, Marcus, that what we're concerned about is not the garage existing, it's the ability for them to put an apartment or another dwelling unit in the, you know, above the
Which
garage.
exists right now.
The ability exists right now, but it would be against the code because, again, I think, because you'd have two dwelling units on one piece of property.
So in that case, I would agree that a condition would be completely appropriate.
Right, it's just that it can't be used as a dwelling. I think that's
So
fine.
is a second principal structure something that can be allowed by variance?
On
No.
a single lot of record?
Yeah,
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, then we have to put the
yeah,
condition.
okay.
But my understanding though is let's say they do build a pool and they want to have a pool house, that they could do that.
That's different.
Yeah, that's not a dwelling, so.
That's totally different, right? I mean, I know, I know back when I was in private practice, of a house in South Deer Park where they had a detached garage and we built a pool house because they built a pool. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's a problem. All right, do I have a motion the motion would be to adopt the findings of fact recommending recommending the plat of consolidation to the city council. With the condition, so, yeah, I would suggest with the condition that the coach house not be allowed to be used as a dwelling unit.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hecht, seconded by Vice Chair Moore. Is this a roll call? No, the roll call, so please call the
Commissioner
roll.
Quinlan,
Aye.
Commissioner Buckman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kirsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Hecht,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore,
Aye.
and Chairman Hainsworth.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays, the motion passes. This will be on a future city council agenda.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure you will get
and-
notice of that, and always good to see you, Mark.
And Happy New Year and happy holidays,
Healthy
everyone.
year.
Thank you.
All right, you can always come back in 2 weeks, we'll be here. The next item is continuation of public hearing 2022 SUP-008 for a special use permit to allow an animal clinic or hospital land use to include design, well, we're not doing design review, so I don't have to say that even. And there are no zoning variations, I don't believe, as appropriate. And to continue 2022-SPE-001 for a special exception to request off-street parking relief to Article 8, requirements of the zoning code and waiver of the payment in lieu of for 661 Central Avenue. And before you start, Carl, Commissioner Hecht, have you reviewed the previous goings-on about this? And you're prepared to work on it tonight? Thank you. One question, and I forget who suggested that we have to reopen the hearing? I don't think we do we? We never closed it. Right, Carl? Because there was something in your memo.
Continued.
Huh?
It was
It
continued.
was always continued, yeah, but there was something you wrote to
Was
us.
it- Maybe that's template that should be updated
Okay.
to reflect current practice. I know a long time ago, they'd always.
Yeah, we used to close
Be
after public
improves.
hearing, yeah, after public
That
comment.
could be template, I apologize.
And I forgot to ask if there was public comment on the last one, but obviously not. All right, Carl, you got a presentation?
Yes, sir. This is just the opening slide, the same one from November 15th. Occupation of an existing tenant space for a pet, overall, it's a pet care business. There's a special use permit that's needed for the animal hospital or clinic. That's the conditional use that requires a special use permit. That's a consideration before the Plan and Design Commission. The Plan and Design Commission needs to make a recommendation on that. Then there's a request for special exception to the Article 8 parking requirements and a waiver to the payment in lieu related to that. And then design review as appropriate will be submitted later, and that was discussed at the last meeting as well. The applicant did provide a preliminary sketch of their facade, but that is not before the commission right now. This is in the downtown zoning district, B5 Central Business District. Okay, November 15th, Plan Design Commission and follow-up. Commission voted 5-0 for findings of fact, recommending approval of special exception with the payment in lieu waiver and for the SUP with one condition. The applicant shall provide the e-permits for the off-street parking spaces for which the relief is granted for the duration of the lease, I believe, was what it was stated by the commission. There was new public comment included in the packet. One was from Mr. Larry Hillman, who, and his comments were in the packet, so I'm always very careful paraphrasing what people say. You should always go to their comments specifically. But he talked about storefront windows not being obscured or covered, and then staff required parking for the proposed business at Port Clinton or Renaissance Place. And again, his comments were in the packet. And then a deed was submitted later that was in the updated packet that I reposted this afternoon that also included findings of fact. And that deed, again, indicated an easement, private easement that's located on the rear of the adjacent property, which leads me into the next slide, just to follow up on the off-street parking review and special exception. So 661 Central Avenue, which is the subject property, is adjacent to 655 Central Avenue. They're adjacent and they are under common ownership. And I did check that on the county assessor records. The two properties can be considered zoning lots. They are under common ownership. So the commission could consider a condition that if the properties are ever separated or come under different ownership, that the parking be provided, protected by covenant on the 655 Central Avenue property, which is the adjacent property. And I did have more in detailed write-up about that in the staff report. Oh yeah, that's what I said, reviewing the packet, the staff report, about the parking requirements for 655 Central Avenue. The current uses there are conforming, and if they're replaced by permitted uses with no expansion or addition, as that's defined in section 150.802 sub C, no additional parking is required. In other words, there is a parking requirement. There's parking requirements for everything. There's parking requirements for every uses. But per section 150.802 sub C, the parking requirement doesn't have to be met in certain districts if the regulations are met, again, specific to those regulations. I just want to point out that section, the section 150.802 sub C, is specific to the B1A, B2, B2RW, B44, B45, B46, B4BG, and B5 zoning districts, and not the B1, the B3, or the I. And I just point that out because those districts that it applies to are those downtown, the Ravinia Business District, and the Waukegan Bloom Neighborhood District. So those are the more denser downtown type districts, as were those districts that are more auto-oriented, like the B1. Oh, that's it. Yeah, no, that's right. The B1, which is a neighborhood commercial, which is usually located on arterials, or the B3, which is the highway commercial located on arterials, or the highway or the I district, which is the light and commercial. They don't have that rule. Again, there weren't any city comments on this one because this is an occupation of an existing space. Right, and then the standard recommendation.
Questions for staff? We'll start over here with, no. So, let me just make a couple comments. Number one is, I want to make it real clear. I believe that a covenant is necessary. I'm concerned if the property is ever sold, and bifurcated, that these two parking spaces remain. If that's a problem for the applicant, I would suggest you just buy 2 more parking spaces, and then you don't have to worry about it. I want to make really clear that by you buying those parking spaces, your employees must park in a designated parking space. They cannot park on the street. They cannot park in an area that is open for customers or residents of a building. I don't think it's necessary to be specific as to where they park, like Mr. Hillman has suggested, but that that the rules in downtown are employees, that's why we have parking spaces, so that employees are not taking up consumer parking spaces. So that's the expectation, and if I need to make that and I think I would like to make that a condition of approval, just to clarify why we're asking them to buy parking permits for the duration of their lease. The other thing is addressing what Mr. Hillman said about covering the windows. In my mind, we're not being asked for design review, but if you were to opaque the windows in some way, the street front windows, the sign ordinance does not allow for window signs. That's because they want them open and clear. So if you were to do something in the way of changing that appearance of the front of the storefront, I would expect that to be handled as part of design review, which of course we're not doing tonight. That's not before us, but I want to make sure that you understand that. The third thing I want you to make sure everybody understands is that the easement cannot be blocked, the easement that goes back there. So, that's the case. of it. The other thing I would suggest is, we make sure that the animals are not walked in the back of in the back of the property. I want it somewhere where it's, visible, and and whoever's walking them, hopefully, has a method of cleaning up after them. I'm gonna expect that personally, that's a management issue for you, I'm assuming, but I wanna make sure, that this does not become a nuisance, as it operates. So with that, is there anything that the applicant wishes to add or speak to us about? And then we'll take public comment. And please note that the student representative has joined us. And you can sit right there.
Good evening. I'm Ruben Warshawski. Ruben is R-E-U-B-E-N, Warshawski, W-A-R-S-H-A-W-S-K-Y.
Yep.
I'm at the firm Meltzer, Patil and Stell, and I'm appearing on behalf of Hal Frank, who unfortunately had a conflict again in another.
You tell Hal that,
I told him that you said he was a coward, and he
He's a
agreed.
coward.
Yeah, he agreed. He sent me.
okay,
I'm happy to answer any questions, but
Sure.
may I ask a question
Sure.
of the chairman?
absolutely.
I'm confused about the covenant issue.
Okay.
My clients are going to be executing a lease with the owner of their property for
Yes.
their space and the owner of the property next door, who also owns 2 parking spaces. Whoever buys either property, whether it's the property that our client is leasing or the property which is attached to 2 parking spaces, which our client has leased contemporaneously for the same period and term as the primary lease, is bound by those leases. Isn't that a covenant?
I'll look to one of my
Are you
attorney
looking-
friends.
Are you looking
So,
for?
so here's what I'm trying to do, right? They're saying they're gonna park 2 employees behind the property immediately to the east. They're owned in common ownership today.
Right.
Tomorrow, they may not be, right? And he's probably right that the lease binds them. But what happens when the lease is renewed?
Well, if the lease is renewed, it's renewed.
But,
Just extend
how
it.
do you
If, I would
how do you bind
Same
somebody else?
Same answer.
Yeah.
The party who has acquired the property is subject to a lease that is subject to
Right.
an extension right. You can't breach that extension right as the owner of that property.
No, the lease does go run with the land, if you will. When you said covenant, that's why I was thinking the same thing. Are you
If you're-
looking for this to be recorded?
No, I'm just
I don't know,
looking to
that's-
make sure that, if this,
If a new owner, even the current owner, landlord would say at the end of the lease,
I'm gonna
not
lease you.
renewing you,
Well, they
you'd
could,
be-
they could renew his lease without the 2 parking spaces, couldn't he?
could, but then there would be,
Well, they're
it
not
would
two
be,
separate
it would be a
leases.
non-conforming use.
Right.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to avoid, I guess.
I don't know that you need a covenant
Okay.
in the approval
That's
of
fine.
that. That's,
I mean, at some point, maybe the condition is that at some point, that those 2 parking spaces cease to be available to them, then they are responsible for buying 2 additional e-permits
that would,
That-
in lieu of,
in lieu of having
lieu
those
of
2
getting
spaces.
2 spots somewhere
Yeah.
else. That's, yeah, I can see that.
Okay. Does that make more sense to you?
I understand that concept better.
Okay.
The
Then,
leverage would be
then
with-
that's fine to know about. I mean, you understand what I'm concerned
I
about,
understand
right?
perfectly, I just-
We're granting a waiver from parking.
I'm a real estate lawyer, so
Yeah.
I know what happens
Well,
when
me
leases
too.
happen.
I think
That's why I
think
looked at,
what- yeah, I think
that's why I looked at my partner here.
I think what chairman is giving you is, all right, well, if this stops being available, here's plan B.
Right.
Right, got it.
So, yeah,
I don't have an issue about this property facility keeping the easement open.
Right, I
I want
don't
to
think
note,
that's
as
a
a matter
problem
of
either.
law, they have to do that anyway.
I don't expect that that's a problem
Okay,
either,
okay. It's
but I'm
something
just
else.
stating it, so sometimes I have to state the obvious
Right, I hear you.
so that everybody hears it, right?
That's great. Okay, good. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Any questions of the petitioner? No? Surprise. Marissa? No.
I should have asked this of staff.
Sure,
but I
you can ask it.
blanked out. The reason there's a 7-spot requirement here is because staff determined that.
This is zoning administrative
An
determination.
interpretation.
Right,
For
it's
the
an
animal,
interpretation. I'm just wondering how that that number was determined.
It's got to do with the veterinary services, part of it.
It's an analogy between the veterinary services at 1,700 square feet with
Right.
a medical clinic at 1,700 square feet.
Correct. And
Right,
the other
okay.
aspects of the use don't have any parking requirement because they are by
Right,
right
that's what I'm
uses and
seeing
therefore
here. is
wouldn't-
the-
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, that's right.
I mean, it
There was
doesn't
also-
sound unreasonable. I just was kind of wondering.
Yep. That's a good
The
question.
way this is written, it's like, oh, well, because if these were just this or this, there's no parking requirement, but if it's not, if it's C, if it's A or B, there's no parking requirement. If it's C, it's determined by the zoning administrator. Okay, well, and the zoning administrator said you need 7 spaces.
Yep.
So I was just wondering how
it's similar
the
to
zoning
medical.
administrator determined that.
Right. Has a similar use to.
Okay.
yeah, Another use on the use table that has that parking requirement.
Okay.
I mean,
Commissioner
those
Birch, you got a
offices are
question?
similar to,
No.
they involve animals versus people.
Vice Chair?
That's
I've-
the logic.
Yeah, yeah.
I've emptied my quiver, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone here who wants to comment on this or come on up? Please. Were you here 3 weeks ago, or last time we heard this? I did not. You did not? Okay, so would you raise your right hand, please? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And would you state your name and spell it for our note taker, please?
Carey Wyman, Carey Weiman.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Floor is yours, Gary.
Thank you. I'm not an attorney, and the attorney partner of mine, Hal Emelfarb, was supposed to be here saying the things that I'm supposed to be saying now. I know how to run a venue, and when the music's too loud and I have to shout too much, this is what you get. I'm sorry, I sound like a fraud.
We can hear you.
Okay.
That's fine.
Before I start with the comments that Hal wants me to read into the record, I still am fuzzy on 3 things that maybe you'll be able to drill down. What are the hours of operation?
Ask them all, and then I'll go back and have.
That's
have
my
them.
question. What are the hours of operation, and what happens when one of the animals has to be cared for overnight? Does that change the hours of operation?
Okay.
Is the rear entry an expanded use? Is it going to be, it says in the packet that we all read that it's going to be for public in and out, for people dropping off animals, for using that entry to go in and shop, and the dog grooming. And I just want to make sure what it is, because
Okay.
when the cars go drop off stuff back there, it'll block the easement.
Correct.
So you already said, though, that the animals would be walked in through the front?
Well, I asked the question, and we'll get the
Okay.
answer from the petitioner on the record.
I just want to make sure that if they are to be walked in through the front, I don't know how that works, that it needs to be put in the permit or whatever. I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, that's okay, you're doing fine.
So I'm going to start reading what Hal
Sure.
asked me to read. This is to be read into the record. This is, it's a submittal for tonight's meeting of the commission. Objections for a vet use as proposed, as filed by Chicago Title Land Trust, the owner of 1799 Green Bay, an adjacent parcel. Clerk Carl, Joel, and the rest of the commission. The following will be read into the record in the matter of, for public hearing, 2022 SUP 008 for a special use permit to allow an animal hospital or clinic located at 661 Central Avenue. I'm reading it in, my name is Carey Wyman, and I'm reading it for Chicago Land Trust Company, Land Trust number 800237, 0291 dated January 25th, 2016. The owner of 1799 Green Bay Highland Park. The adjacent parcel to the north of the subject location, the applicant indicates that they are to take over parking spaces currently being occupied by existing tenants. And in doing so, they intend to expand the nonconformity over the same area where the parking spaces will be used by introducing new uses in a lot already stretched to the limit. Illinois law prohibits expansion of lawful nonconforming uses. The basis for this prohibition is that such expansion impacts all the adjacent properties, and by the applicant's express statement, they intend to use the same area for staff parking, maneuvering rear door access for deliveries and loading, unloading, expanding the rear entry to become retail access where this use has never been allowed as a retail entry. As per our testimony provided by last week, made part of the public record, there is an easement. Sorry, I'm reading what he said. There is an easement that exists since 1941 on the same adjacent property that provides for the adjacent owner for loading and unloading. That will be interfered with as there is not sufficient space for the expanded nonconforming of uses proposed that create a hazard. The commission rules require the applicant to submit a diagram showing that they are not increasing the nonconformity. Instead, they have not provided this diagram of how the combination of staff parking combined with the loading, unloading, retail customers newly accessed. There's a bug walking here, that's why I'm smiling. Accessing the lot for drop-off and pickup. Parking introduces expanding non-conforming uses without the commission members or staff seeing how vehicles can turn around safely. There is no diagram, and therefore a lack of clarity of activity must be dimensioned on a diagram. The applicant cannot expand the non-conforming and needs to reduce the uses of what can be feasible, not squeeze more non-conformity into an already small restricted lot. The applicant intend to increase non-conforming uses with the same area of the lot will create a hazard by these overlapping activities. We were, as a business where food is delivered through the rear, we are very concerned about the feces, how that would be taken care of, and it would need not to be put in a dumpster that would interfere with our business because it's poo-poo. Due to limited space, there's no functional way for the staff to have a safe way of operation to load, unload, and create a safe space for retail. Did this get... I'm sorry, he sent me double. So he didn't conclude it correctly, so I'll just say thank you, and I will look forward to the answers to these questions.
Thank you, Kerry.
Do I sit down
Mr.
now?
Yeah, you can sit down now. Let's just make sure you're not, there's no other public comment on this matter? Okay, Mr. Warshawski, would you like to respond and clarify
Sure.
some of the things? So let me just go through the hours of operation.
That you?
You need to come up to the microphone and state your name again for the record. You were sworn the last time, correct?
Yes.
Okay, state your name and,
Greg Gibson, GRE, spell it again.
no, you don't, I don't think.
Greg Gibson.
Okay, Mr. Gibson, what's the hours of operation?
The plan is for it to be normal retail hours, 8 to 6 on weekdays. We said 8 to 1 likely on Saturdays for the veterinary practice. The same for the retail and grooming on weekdays and Saturdays, and Sunday retail will be open, 8 to 5.
And how do you take care of, in the event that you have to keep an animal overnight? How do you see that?
What was stated was there are occasions in a normal veterinary practice where there might be 1 or 2 animals contained. If they're in serious condition, they'll be kept in crates. It will not increase the business hours of the practice, and there might be a vet that comes in to check on them, but there'll be no,
They're not there
customer.
full-time overnight,
No.
right? The vet isn't.
no, that is.
And you had how many, I know you had a couple of kennels for surgical patients down there. Do you remember? I mean, I think they were up there, it was like 2 or something like that.
Well, I said, likely the most that would be kept overnight would be 2, just by statistical probability. There'll be more crates because the animals are sometimes kept in while they're waiting for grooming or while they're waiting or done with
Okay.
grooming.
So 2 overnights, okay. You did mention in the past, at the past hearing, that you foresaw people coming in the back door, and customers, I'm talking about, not staff.
Yep.
I believe that we expressed some discomfort at that thought.
Okay.
So would you have a problem if that door was, you agreed to limit that door for staff only?
I mean, it's a bit of a problem based on our plan for the business. There our 2 parking places are right there, and staff may use them, but if we have an elderly animal,
So-
the reservations were stated by not this gentleman, but another neighbor.
Right. Same entity.
That entrance has been used prior as a retail entrance for the bike shop.
So-
We don't expect a lot of traffic, but we thought we had reserved.
So let me tell you the concern I have with that, right? The 2 parking spaces, the parking spaces I thought were designated for staff purposes. So come back to me and tell me again, how many staff are going to be on site at any given time?
So what we stated was, I think, 7 to 10 at maximum. And I'm pretty sure we said not probably for a couple of years, because we're gonna have 1 vet there to start, a couple techs.
So opening day, how many staff people do you anticipate?
5 maximum.
So one of the things I am going to tell you is, if you're not going to use those 2 spaces for staff only, every one of your staff people has to have an E-permit. Everybody who drives to work has to have an E-permit. There's no other way for you to manage this.
So I just want to clarify, you just said 2 different things. Every staff person or everyone who's driving to work.
Every staff person, I'm not going to make you, if somebody's taking the train,
Right.
I'm not going to make you get an E-permit for that person. But if they drive and I do not anticipate you're going to have a ton of people using the train to come to work. It's my anticipation. I ride the train down to my office. I see very few people getting off at Highland Park, right? In the morning. And most of them are quite honestly, they seem to be domestic help. So if they're driving to work, they have to have a place to park. The only place they can park is an E-space
Or those 2 spaces.
or those 2 spaces. But if those 2 spaces are being used,
And I
it's
don't-
not a public entry.
It's not the intent to use those 2 spaces to leave them open for people to come in. Does the staff have a drawing that's an overhead look at the rear area?
I think that's exactly what he's got up there.
Perfect.
That's
Thank
it
you. I
right
didn't
there.
notice you pull it up.
That's
Okay.
it right there.
What I want to, that's beautiful. Okay, good. What I want to point out is whatever that red thing is, I don't know if it's a vehicle or dumpster,
Yeah.
That's where the door is.
Right.
The parking is great shot for having two cars there. That's where the two spots are gonna be.
The white car and the
Well,
one
let-
next
let me
to it,
just
right?
clarify. So the door is over here.
Right.
The door is over here, and our two spots are right there.
Yeah.
That's an illegally parked car. The easement,
Yes, by the way, the
the back
easement
of
is
the
the.
car.
The easement,
10
yeah, I
feet
know,
from the
yeah,
easement. I measured it today. It's 10 feet from the back of these cars to
Right.
the easement.
okay,
We're not gonna be blocking the
okay,
easement.
okay, talk to me, not
So
to,
the idea is that if, in an emergency, or if it's difficult because it was an older animal.
Yeah.
And worst case scenario is the 4 or 5 spots that are right in front of this retail establishment are crowded and filled with parking, because there's gonna be hopefully.
you're gonna
someone
figure out a way to
sitting
get
down.
them in.
So our suggestion would be to a person would come around and pull into that illegal spot, unload their dog, move their car, and we would take care of the dog inside the facility. And there's not gonna be blockage of the 11 feet. You can see there's a van parked there. That van is probably 7 feet wide. There's clearly turnaround space and backing up space and movement and ability to get through it.
Well, you're under no obligation to provide that for
I
for the
understand.
neighbor anyway.
Right.
You
But
you
we're
can
not
only keep
blocking-
the easement open.
Right, and the idea is that that was previously retail-oriented access. No one's really walking back there, people aren't, it's not a
No, it's
frequently
not
used
a
area.
good place.
So I don't expect this to be an expansion of the existing use that it was prior.
Right. Okay, what else?
Well, I still don't feel that we have the clarification as to, are these two spaces going to be left open all the time for retail people, or are they
No,
always going
there's,
to be
no,
used
no.
for staff?
I think I was clear, but I apologize. Those are two spaces that are for staff parking.
Okay,
They're not
so,
for-
but if there's an emergency, what's gonna happen when the emergency patient has to come into the back? Where are they gonna park? Because the two spaces are gonna be used for employees.
Understood. What I said was that they would either pull into an open space there, because by the way, one of the issues that I think that the public comment was raising is that there's no other room back there because those five spaces, I think? 7 spaces were always filled.
Right.
The landlord has looked at their property, this is in their letter, by the way, that's in the packet, and they were not being properly used, they were being unlawfully used or improperly used by others, and now they will be dedicated 2 spaces for Pets for Life, and the other spaces they'll either dedicate to specific tenants or leave open. So or lease them to you, okay. There's either an open space there, or one of the employees will go out, get the dog who's old or ill, bring it in, while the person who has the car backs out. That's all I was saying. I wasn't saying that they were gonna be parking back there.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure I
So,
understood.
I apologize for any.
Because we've kind of talked about using those spaces in 2 different ways, and it wasn't totally clear. But if the person is out, so if all 7 spots are filled, somebody comes in with an emergency sick dog, to get the dog out, they're gonna be having to park in the easement or presumably behind the employee cars while they get the
Presumably
dog
behind
out.
employee cars, because again, there's sufficient space, there's 10 feet of space. as my
Okay,
client
and then they have to
indicated.
go move their,
Well, they would, because the vet has come out, or the staff person has come out, taken the dog and brought it into the waiting room, and can begin whatever they need to do for the dog.
okay.
And then they'll have to
And
move
the-
their
and
car
the-
to
and
another
the-
parking
the-
spot, because there's no
The
parking.
dog owner isn't gonna be freaking out and needing to go in with the dog and,
We can't manage the expectations of every
I'm just-
single
I'm
client,
just- but I'm trying to
our suggestion
understand.
would be, you can't stay here.
Okay,
You'll be
just-
ticketed.
trying to understand all the,
Absolutely.
ramifications of
That
this.
happens at
Every place.
people hospitals, at the ER, you can't just leave the car in front of the door.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay,
So the area back there is wide open. I've been there 20 times in the past few months. There's nobody, this is representative of what's parked there.
Yeah.
It's even more. And there's room for somebody to come in, and there's room to this side of those 2 parking spots where you could fit 3 more cars, but there's no parking spaces there. So I'm not sure what the confusion about the crowding around there, because
no,
I
I
could drive
wasn't
a
confused,
van
I
in.
wasn't confused about crowd,
No, I
I
don't
just
mean by
wanted to
you.
make sure we understood the use of the 2 spaces, and I'm hearing, in one case, it was for retail customers, and the other case, it's for employees, so I just want to understand. 'cause
I apologize,
If we're leaving them
apologize if I said
open for retail, then we need to do 2 more e-parking tickets.
If I said retail parking, that was a mistake.
No, I don't- I
No
don't.
retail
I
parking.
don't think it's retail, I think it's, let's call it public parking and not employee parking.
Right, well, when we talk about it being a public entrance, one assumes that the public would be parking next to it.
Right.
Okay,
There's 2 signs on those that say parking only.
Thank you.
For employees
Yeah.
of Pets for Life.
Can I just respectfully ask if we were, if the 1,700 square feet of vet practice was a conforming use, we would not have to have these 7 parking places?
That's true, but it's not.
I'm honestly just asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's, if, well,
I don't-
there are lots of ifs, right?
I said respectfully.
I could sit here and do ifs all day. The bottom line is, it's been determined it is not a conforming, it's a special use.
Understood.
And with the special use, because it's not a permitted use in the district, then you have to meet parking requirements for that part of the use. And that's all that's all we're trying to do. And what I want to make sure we memorialize is, and this is where I'm getting some heartburn, right? That if there's staff parking spaces, those 2 are dedicated staff parking spaces, I'm good with that, right? Then all I'm asking you to do is for the other 5 spaces you're required to have, that you buy and enforce that your employees park in a permitted E-permit space, right? Wherever those are, and you can find them on the website. If they're going to be used for some other purpose, then I want to make sure we have, that the parking fee, the parking requirement is met. Because part of what you're asking for is, how much again is the per space, cost of a variance?
I believe it's $15,000 per space.
Okay, we're giving you, we're granting you a $15,000 times 7 incentive, right? To
Times
do
5.
this. Well, in this case, in this case, it'll be times 5 if they're employee parking, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, you understand my concern. I don't have a problem, and I think I stated this last time. I don't have a problem granting the waiver. I want to make sure that your employees are properly parked at all times. And, if we're talking, I'm just trying to get to the right number. If we're talking 5 employees and 2 employees in the back, that's fine. If we're talking 7 employees and 2 spaces that are available for our customers or our patients to use, that's fine too. But then I'm going to say, I want you to provide 7 e-permits for perpetuity of the, for the length of the lease. So that's where I'm trying to get at. You can't have both, right? You can't have, I want 5 parking spaces. If I'm going to leave, I'm going to allow people with sick animals, and I understand that happens. I happen to have had dogs almost my whole life. Spent a lot of time at Blue Pearl over the years, after hours. So, I'm trying to get some certainty, where I'm coming from is I'm trying to get some understanding of what it is you're really asking for. And I'm getting confused because I hear, in one case, oh, no, there's going to be employees only. But if somebody has a sick dog, they're going to bring them in that back door.
And again, I apologize for any confusion. I
Yeah.
think I've tried, and I'll try one more time to clarify. The intent is, as always, to have 2 employees parking in those 2 spaces.
Fine.
If there's a sick animal that we bring in, we have employees who can go out and remove that animal and then move the car.
It's not as though-
I don't know how, I mean, I'll continue to say it.
So
I also want you to
let's
understand.
go- I got you now.
Yeah.
So let me, and as Commissioner Heck just said, it's not a parking issue. It's a drop-off, it's a loading
I
issue
don't
more.
I don't view that what you're describing
No.
as a parking issue.
No, but the question is, okay, where does that happen? And, if it's happening, in one of the spaces in the back, do you have the right to use that space for that purpose?
Since the person who owns the parcel that we are leasing, as
Right.
well as the neighboring parcel,
Right.
owns that entire back area,
Right.
subject to an 11-foot easement at the back,
Right.
yes, we have a right of use,
Okay.
not of lease.
So what
To
happens?
Use it as a drop-off area for a sick animal.
So what happens then, I guess the question becomes, you said there's 10 feet from the back of the car to the easement, right?
10 to
Well,
12, yeah.
huh?
10 to 12.
Well,
No.
if a car pulled in head in, that's more like 16, right? 15,
Well,
16.
Can I ask,
right?
help you out? here a
Sure,
little bit?
thanks, Adam. Dig me out of my hole.
What, is this what kind of easement is this?
The easement at the back 11 feet is an easement that was put in place in 1941. I can show you a copy if you'd like to see it.
I don't
think
I don't
we
really
have-
want to read it. I
I
do
think
that
we
all day
have
long.
one.
No, that's a deed, it's not the easement.
It shows the easement.
The easement is the back 11 feet.
Is
It's
it
an
just
easement-
ingress egress?
It was originally granted by the United States of America. It's
Really?
for egress and egress to that building labeled 1799, which even in the 1940s was apparently a recreation club.
It's a Moose Lounge.
It's the Moose
was a
Lounge
Moose
now,
Lounge.
but it was a recreation club.
No, it was the
And I-
Moose Lounge.
The concern was, I think, for service people being able to get in freely along the back there. And it was granted in 1944. I will tell you again, because I do practice real estate law, there's an argument that that easement should be terminated because of certain conditions in it, but not worth arguing about,
You mean
because it's been insured by
racial and-
Chicago Title anyway, so no.
Racial restrictions?
No, it was
Really?
restrictions on the ownership of adjacent parcels, which are no longer owned by the entities that were specified in the document. But again,
I don't have it.
it's a,
That's a
if I wanted to take it up with the title company, I could.
No,
but
no,
it's not
the
relevant.
reason I'm asking is, if that's an ingress egress easement,
Mm-hmm.
then people are, and you have a door back there, people are gonna use it no matter what we say. If they have a sick animal or they feel like it, they're gonna bring their dog back.
And by the way, they have.
I don't know that we can do
They
anything.
have a right to do that.
Right,
Anyone who's
right.
back there has a right to utilize it because it's not an exclusive easement solely for the use of 1799.
That's where I was going.
It becomes, it's a public area anyway. You can't obstruct it, so you couldn't construct anything there or frankly, leave anything there for more than a temporary period, whatever that is.
I think, and I'll help you out here, I think what, and I haven't seen the easement, so I don't
There's
know
a
what
good
it says
picture of it.
specific. No, I mean the document, but that's a public right. We can't prevent people from going back there anyway. I don't know that we can even put a condition on, we can put a condition that those two spaces have to be used by staff.
Right.
But I don't think we can go any further than that because that easement would trump it anyway.
I don't either.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
But my point is, I was trying to get to what are those spaces going to be used for?
yeah, well, I think.
Right, that's all.
I think that's a fair
And
condition.
I think they
And it sounds
very
like that's what
clearly
they're
said
doing.
staff, so, and it needs to be, it probably needs to be signed that way. you
Yeah.
know, So, all right, anything else?
Well, could we request, if it's gonna be required for staff only, you touched on a topic of all our staff have to park, any staff who's gonna park in the city has to have an E-permit?
Not for those two spaces.
Okay.
That's why we said 5.
If you have 7 staff.
If you have
and
7
2 spots,
spaces,
you need
2 are
5.
back there, 5 are off-site.
So for the period of time when we have 4 or 5 employees for the first year, not that we're not arguing about 2 E-permits but how do we manage that and keep in good graces with?
You buy 5 E-permits.
Why would you buy them if you don't have the employees yet?
Because I have no way of knowing when they increase staff.
What?
Well, actually, forgetting anything, don't you have to, regardless of what happens here, employees have to park either in dedicated staff parking spaces or have E-permits?
Yeah.
So I'm not, why is that, would that be part of an approval? If you
Well,
have to
all
do
I
it
can,
anyway.
here's what I will tell you is, the way I got to this is I was involved back when I was in private practice, I did a project in Highland Park. We needed a parking variation. That's what this is a parking variation. part of the parking variation, the requirement for the parking variation was you will buy e-permits for your staff so that they did not take up the parking spaces in the permitted, because part of the permitted spaces, some of it was customer parking, some of it was staff parking.
Right.
If you don't have enough parking, you need to make sure that, you need, they were making sure that our staff was parking in the appropriate place. And that made up the difference, right?
Right.
So yes, you were getting a variance. Yes, in this case, they're getting a waiver from the required $15,000 of space.
Right.
But in return, they are going to buy their staff e-permits.
Well,
And
could
make
we
them-
make the condition instead of a set number saying for each employee in excess of 2, they have to buy an e-permit?
My only concern with that is, how do you police it?
I don't know how you police,
I don't know
yeah,
how
you
you-
don't police anything.
But I don't know how
How
you
do you
can buy
police
an
anything?
e-permit if you don't have an employee to assign it to.
That's like.
Are those assignable? I mean, I don't even know. That's a great question.
I mean, I would think.
Are those assignable?
They're just, I don't know, it's like a hang tag or a pay,
Yeah.
I mean, you could just give them to people.
Right.
I don't
Oh,
know.
I thought,
No.
I remember when I had to apply for overnight parking, you had to get a number, you
That's
had to fill
different.
out your driver's license,
Right.
or your car
Pledge
license
your
You
first
plate.
child.
can't get it without an employee.
Huh?
That's what you're saying. You can't get it.
Well,
without
that's
an
the
employee.
question. Can you get it without an employee?
I think you can make okay.
Well, doesn't. if
I
the
think,
code-
that becomes a matter of enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Are you
Right.
seeking the revenue or are you seeking the parking space? Because, I mean, I would not
Yes.
enforce on someone if the rule was that they
Yes.
couldn't purchase the thing without an employee.
Yeah,
There would be no such enforcement.
it's kind of both. Both making sure there's a parking space, but also, making sure that we get the revenue, some of the revenue that would come from that, because otherwise they could hire people and not.
I understand. They testified that they would only
I know.
have
Commissioner
a minimum of 5 people. So then that would
Commissioner Quinlan?
take care of the 5 spaces.
Right.
So if they should not have that many staff, then they might get away with not paying for a year.
Commissioner Quinlan?
The condition, year 1, 5 permits, year 2, 6, and then after year 3, 7, going forward.
That's gonna be, again, I don't know. I mean, what,
Okay,
how much
we
is an e-permit? I forget.
I mean,
$283 a month,
A month?
No, a year.
No,
Sorry,
a year.
285 a year.
285 a year.
I mean, we're not talking a lot of money, right? If your business rises or falls on, $1,000 a year, then you've got bigger problems than us requiring you to do that, in my mind.
Could I make a suggestion?
Sure,
How about so 7 is the maximum that we'll have to buy, correct? That is what we have to purchase.
Five.
well, 5 right now, if you're using
Two spaces
2 for,
So I apologize, I don't know that I ever stated that this was only gonna be used for staff use in the back, but
okay?
so in
So
line,
assuming it's
Maximum
not,
7.
then
in
maximum
line,
7.
if we have to buy 7, as Commissioner Quinlan started to say, well, what? Sorry,
Go on.
I don't mean to.
No, go
I'm
on.
just saying, we'll buy e-permits for the first 7 employees, as soon, for 7 employees, but as we bring them on, so we'll buy.
I don't know how we enforce
The
that,
first 7 employees we hire.
huh?
I don't think enforcement's up to.
Well, no, but I don't know, I mean, if we're creating a condition that's hard to enforce, I'd rather just say, you're gonna buy 7 e-permits and leave it at that.
Okay,
I mean, personally, because then there's no question. And then if you increase above that, if you need more employees than those 7, you're gonna have to buy e-permits for them, because there's no other place for them to park.
It's not a requirement here, but you're gonna end up doing it.
You're gonna wind up doing it anyway. They can't park on the street.
I mean, we were considering offering it as a, yes, for our employees, like to give them a place to park, just having a condition, we weren't aware, but the condition's gonna be to buy 7.
So let me ask you a question. You have 10 employees, right? Let's
Yes.
say. Where are the 3 that you aren't buying e-permits for? Where are they gonna park?
No, I'm saying we would probably buy them. This is something I wasn't aware of until we got here. Not
I get it.
tonight, but the last
I
time.
know.
And so some may take the train, but yes, if we have an employee who's driving in from a half hour away, we would get them a $285 parking pass.
So Marcus, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, just briefly. So the determination by the community development director was that this use would have 7 spaces. And so if this were anything else, and they had 10 employees, then those 3 employees would be parking on the street just normally. I mean, the determination by staff was that it's 7 for this type of use. And I'm,
If they had 10 employees, they'd still have to, my understanding is, they can't park on the street. I mean, I guess they could park for 3 hours on the street. But those are all time-limited spaces, right? So, and I believe the city tracks, so you can't move from one space to another in the central business district,
well,
right? So that's why they have e-permits, so there's a place for employees to park.
So the calculation here was that this type of use would take 7 parking spaces. If in reality it's taking up 10, then I think that's just, the determination was made that this type of use takes up 7. Anything above that, to me, as far as I can see, is outside of what the staff's calculation.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
think we can.
We can't
Yeah,
force them
require
to do
them
it.
to have it.
Yeah,
We
but
can't,
it's
it's a
outside.
matter of course that they do it in the central business district for all businesses and their employees, right? Employees are supposed to be parking in designated e-permit spaces throughout the central business district.
But we can't require.
We
the
can't
applicant
require them to
do more.
build, to buy more than that. I'm just saying, for their knowledge, right? We're gonna require them to say, we can require them to pay for 7, because that's the variance we're giving them. Or the exception we're giving them. But as they grow, and we hope that they do grow, that as they add employees, they're gonna probably have to deal with this for those
Well,
employees,
I mean, it
right?
depends if they can, they could buy them for the staff, that's the non-veterinary staff, veterinarian staff, and say the veterinarians go buy it yourself.
Yeah,
Can
I mean, they
do whatever
could,
they want.
but,
That's
yeah,
their
they,
problem.
Yeah,
that's their problem to
their
have.
problem, not
Yeah,
ours.
whether you have to
Out of it.
buy it or you have your employees buy it, that's up
We're
to
out
you.
of it.
All I'm saying
I don't
is,
think that has-
your
that's-
employees are gonna have to park
That's,
somewhere.
I understand
All right.
outside of our purview.
Okay. Anything else? So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So what are we doing here? I mean, we have findings of fact, we have findings of fact in front of us, right?
Right, and are the 2 spaces in the back for employees?
One second, I'll get to you, Carrie. The question is, do we make them, restrict them to employees? Or
It
do
says it in
we,
here already.
huh?
It's in the findings of fact.
Oh, it says those are for employees?
No, it says, for providing e-permits.
Wait a minute. I know, but the question is,
Yeah, I do, Chair, I do request clarification.
yeah, we need to clarify
Yeah,
that.
because if there does need to be any amendment to this condition, I would
So.
seek that clarification.
So I think what one way to clarify it would be to say up to 7 e-permits, the number can be reduced by designating the 2 spaces in back as employee parking. So if they use 1 for employee parking and 1 for general parking, then they buy 6. If they decide both of them are general parking, they buy 7. If they decide both of them, the spaces are employee, pardon me, parking, then they only have to buy 5, I mean, we could do it that way maybe. But,
We leave it in the applicant's hands to determine.
how he wants to
how you
use
want to
those
use
2
those
spaces,
And
right?
there's no harm in that.
No, I don't have a problem
That's
with that.
fine, and that, if they are only gonna have 5 people the first year, then that makes, that makes sense. That allows them to have flexibility with those 2 parking spaces, and then if they get 2 more employees in the next couple of years.
And they have to make decisions.
Right.
But they're gonna have to inform the building department.
So,
how-
okay,
or
so here's the thing. If you just look at the math, we require 7 spaces, and those spaces can be used for employees or the public. Right, if it
Is
were,
that correct? Joe?
if it were any other location,
Right.
it's 7 spaces. And there's no designation as to whether they have to be employee spaces or, customer spaces, right?
If that's the case,
So
then
then
all we need is a
it's,
5,
then we need 5.
right?
I just want to point out that we're having a lot of discussion about $566 a year.
I get that, but it's important.
It's
In my
not, it's
mind.
not
If the
the,
applicant wants
It's not the
that
money.
ability, then
it's not the money, it's understanding, because this is a new use for the area, and it's important to make sure we understand all the implications for that.
no, I understand that. I think if the applicant wants the flexibility to dedicate one or both of those
Well,
two spots as
but if we're all-
staff parking, then
If all we're doing is saying it could be, all they're required is 7 spaces and it's not designated as to, those are just for employees, then we can say buy 5 e-permits,
Yeah.
and they can use those 2 spaces however they want.
right.
If they get more employees, then they have to buy more e-permit, they have to, either they or the employee has to have an e-permit. Right?
Right.
Okay. Carrie, you wanted to make another comment? You come out, you need to come up. And just, and briefly, please. Thank you. By the way, Illinois is winning in overtime against Texas.
Against Texas. Look at that.
Big game.
Did everybody see this?
Out Kofi Comer.
Well, they,
no, would you like
have you
to-
seen them? They're a really different team. They're pretty
I guess-
amazing.
You can,
This isn't a big deal, but signs were put up for Pets for Life, which they lease them. I got no problem with them, but I just have a problem with the non-clarity of it. These are parking signs that do not say employees on them, do not say anything except Pets for Life, and they were put up before.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, they were put up before any granting of anything went through.
So let me just clarify that.
Okay.
Okay, once again, they are required to provide 7 parking spaces. It does not say just for staff. It's just 7 parking spaces, right? So what we're saying is you need to buy permits for the 5 that you are not being able to capture on the site. They can put up those signs because, assuming they have a signed lease today. No, I know. Yeah, if the landlord put them up, great. But, the bottom line is they don't need our permission to put those signs up. They need our permission to operate a veterinary clinic. And so, if they lease 2 parking spaces and they don't have the veterinary clinic, they wouldn't even be here, right? Just so you understand. The uses, other than the veterinary part of this, are permitted uses.
Right.
If it's a permitted use, they don't have to address parking at all. It's only because they're asking for veterinary services that they're in front of us tonight. And they're asking for a waiver for 7 parking spaces. Right? Is that
Well, it's also somewhat ironic that it's a special use because we just
we made it a special
We just
use.
made it a special
It's not
use.
ironic, they couldn't have existed downtown.
Well, I
before
mean,
that.
they also testify, I just point out that they did testify 3 weeks ago that in their belief, the use is no more it's intensive than the bike shop was before. That's arguable.
They can believe whatever they want. The
I'm
zoning
just-
administrator is telling us something.
You guys all have, I'm just commenting, I think that this level of scrutiny on the parking in a dense downtown area is burdensome, and I mean, we're taking up an awfully lot of time on something that I
agree with that.
I just can't.
My comments were not geared at parking situation. My comments are geared at how small it is back there And we,
You know, Carrie, it's a parking lot. It's a parking
Right.
lot today, it's gonna be a parking lot tomorrow. As long as they don't block your easement,
got it.
and that easement is there to allow them to get back, to that parking lot, just like it is to allow your business to use it.
And I'm not looking.
No, I know, I'm just
If
trying to
they're
clarify
there,
for you.
of course, we're all gonna get along. That's not, I just wanna see if there's any problems gonna be happening because of the new use that's gonna be going. And I have a problem. What are the hours?
They said what the hours were.
Well, they said on one hand 9 to 5, let's say. They said on the other hand, it's 24 hours if a vet has to stay there. So how do you?
I didn't hear that a vet has to stay there. The vet may have to come and go, but it's one person. It's not open for business then.
Okay.
It's just for somebody to come in and look after the animal, just like they do in every other vet.
Okay.
I think your business is at night, right? With the facility.
Yeah, the
Yours is
trucks
during the
that we
day.
have
Primarily.
to
That's the
load
issue,
Right.
have to load in, so on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's true.
Or whenever it is, the trucks come 4 to 5 hours before the event, they unload.
Right.
The next truck comes to unload, and my business is based on being able to use that easement and loading and unloading. When a dog comes, because I've had animals, and I know how it gets, I would start crying like the dog would when we get to this back door. I've never gone in through a back door. I always go through the front
Right.
door. So I'm worried about stacked up cars in that situation. That's just my concerns for my business. So if everybody gets along, I want that.
It doesn't sound like that's, I mean, it might
Okay.
be once in a while, somebody might bring an animal.
My last
to that
question,
thing.
can the police write tickets on private property?
I don't know.
If somebody's just like leaves their car there? Or
No,
too
because
long?
you said a policeman could write a ticket, or somebody
said
said that. I don't know.
It depends on the violation.
Depends on, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to take up any more time.
That's it, guys. Let's not worry about that right now. Thank you. That you guys need to resolve someplace else. Marcus?
Just one last point. The definition for animal hospital and clinics includes overnight stays.
Right.
So-
It's not unusual, right?
And we
But the veterinary is,
Well, right.
the vet in this case seems to almost be like a accessory use almost.
And we also made clear that this can't be a kennel though, and
Right.
things like that.
Right, you're not
Carl
doing
did-
boarding.
Yeah,
No,
he did a very.
they said that.
No,
Right.
It was already clear in the record.
report.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
in the report, yeah.
Back to what we want to do with this.
Can I just ask one quick?
Sure
question?
you
I'm
can.
trying not to make this too
Sure.
complicated, because this really isn't a complicated application.
No, it isn't. But
So the requirement's 7. The request is to not have to provide 7, to provide 2. We're saying, okay, the findings of fact saying, all right, we'll let you do that, but you have to pay for 7 permits.
Well, in this case, we're saying 5.
Well, the findings of fact say 7.
Yeah, well, okay.
So I know we can change it, but.
Yeah, correct.
I have a concern of the relationship between those two. Those 7 spots that are required are not 7 staff spots, they're 7 spots that can be used by anybody, a customer, a staff member, anybody for this use. It's not necessarily for employees. So why are we requiring permits for all of for even certainly anytime more than 5, because there's still 2 spots there. But why are we requiring them at all? The parking requirement is not specific to employees. Maybe
It's up to the commission.
Because I think part
it's
of
to everybody.
Because I don't think they have other parking permits. I think that's the only
Well, I
parking
think part of
permit
it
we
was
do.
because
You
they
have
were
to-
asking for us to waive the parking in lieu fee.
Oh, the
So
70,
that was
the
kind of
75 grand?
Yeah.
Yes, so this was a way around that.
Okay, so then, to me, then, the maximum E-permit requirement should be 5, because they are providing 2 spots.
I agree.
No matter whether it's
Right.
staff only or not.
Right. I've
So
talked
we would have to
myself into
amend the
5.
findings of fact, right?
Yes, so I would suggest yes,
That would be amended to say 5 then.
right.
Okay.
What I would suggest is you amend it to be
To
5.
clarify, 5.
Right. Yes.
Right, that's not legible. If it's in too much, it doesn't show up on.
It's okay. All right. So any other amendments to the findings of fact that we want to put in here?
This will be how to all get along.
I suggest you guys go have a
Yeah.
drink together. Do I have a motion to approve the findings of fact recommending approval to, we got to take them separately. So first is, and I should ask if our student has anything she wants to add. No?
Very interesting.
Have we confused the heck out of you tonight?
Me.
Yes,
Can I ask one question?
sure.
And I don't mean to put
As long
Marcus,
as we're here.
I don't mean to put Marcus on the spot, but this, the condition of approval, which, it would appear that the motion may include an amendment to make that 5, but that's not my question. My question is, would it be more appropriate for that to be in the SUP or the special exception? I had it with the SUP because you can have conditions with the SUP.
Right, and I think it could only go in the SUP.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Okay.
That answers that. That's how I had it.
Yes, Ruben, come on up.
It was the conversation about amending it from 7 to 5 that tipped me. I think that, is there a condition in the approval to provide, or was it just a request, to create a condition with respect to maintaining those 2 spots? This is the conversation we had about it being a lease and subject to not termination because it was a combined lease. I just want to make sure that it's not going to be a recommendation that there be a condition placed on those 2 spots.
I think if this is approved, you would have to maintain those 2 spots. Because you're looking
Agreed.
for a reduction from 7 to 2.
Right.
You have to maintain the 2. If the landlord changes, for some reason they say, we don't want to give them to you anymore, you're out of compliance.
Right,
and you have
but
to
not
make-
some special condition with respect to if the ownership changes. It's just a condition to have the 2
I think
spots.
it's just to me, I'm speaking for myself, I think that's just a requirement of the approval.
Agreed.
And it's not a special, it's just a normal requirement that you have
Got
to
it.
comply with.
Okay, thanks.
To me. Of course, I'm speaking instead of
I'm okay
counsel
with
here.
that. Okay. So,
I would move approval, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, I recognize you.
I would move approval of the findings of fact, recommending approval of the special use permit with the amendment that the plan in finding 6, that the Plan and Design Commission finds that this standard is met with the granting of relief for the special exception and the condition that the applicant provides 5 E-permits for the number of spaces being granted relief for the duration of the lease.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Commissioner Kirch and second by Vice Chair Moore. Call, any discussion? Thank God. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Quinlan.
Aye.
Commissioner Buckman.
Aye.
Commissioner Kirsch.
Aye.
Commissioner Heck.
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore.
Aye.
Chairman Haynes.
Aye. 6 ayes, no nays, that motion passes. And now can I have a motion recommending approval of the special exception for relief from the required parking ordinance?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Moore, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bruckman. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Quinlan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bruckman.
Aye.
Commissioner Kirsch.
Aye.
Commissioner Heck.
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore.
Aye.
And Chairman Haynesworth.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays. That carries. This will go before the city council at a future meeting. I'm sure the staff will notify you as to when to expect that. Good luck and welcome to Highland Park. Hopefully your life will be easier now.
Once you're rid of us.
But I would suggest you talk with your neighbor, please. All right, other business. Do we have a administrative design review update?
No, there's no update for that, Chair.
No update. Our next regular meeting, our final one of 2022, will be December 20th, 2022. What is on the schedule for that, sir?
So the two primary public hearings that I remember, there's the continued Woolbright multifamily development by Fulton Developers.
On Walnut.
And then there is a public hearing, a project by the city. The city will be an applicant for improvements on, at 1150 Half Day Road where my office is at. We are calling that the Salt Dome Project.
Oh,
And then that's off the cuff. That's all I remember. Of course, those
No
are the public
problem.
hearings. Those are the easy ones for you to remember. I cannot recall if there are any design reviews. If there, it would only be one or two at most, and there may be none.
The Salt Dome was, as part of the budget that was just adopted by city council.
Good.
That is a project on the Public Works Department.
back in the back,
work plan.
right?
Yep, to replace the one.
And,
we
and by
had.
the way, I was very I'm very impressed with the berm in front of the refueling.
Yes, referred to as
the space.
Count Bannon,
Huh?
Director.
Yeah, it's very
Ron
nice.
Bannon.
Yes. Any case briefings?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Any business from the public? Seeing none.
Chair,
Yes.
before we adjourn, one thing that we did not do is take comments on that first matter.
Yes.
If we can just make sure that no one here is,
No one here got shorted. I don't think everybody who was in the room was here for the second part of this, the second case tonight,
I
so.
don't think there was anyone here, but thank you.
Right, thank you, and I did say I forgot to do
for
that, so.
That wasn't a public hearing, though.
Ju-
It was a public meeting.
Just for that, I'm going to do penance in January. Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by, I'm going to give it to Commissioner Hecht, second by Vice Chair Moore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Half hour later than we
Motion
wanted to
to
be.
reconsider E-permit.
No.
Sorry, anyone?
Motion to reopen the meeting, is there?
I'm